Fame, power, immortality. For some, Hollywood's spotlight became a prison long before the bars closed. Behind the cameras and the red carpets, a darker reality was waiting, where lies, greed, and violence took the stage. 13 once celebrated names now live in cells instead of mansions, haunted by their own sins. This is not fiction. These are the Hollywood legends who are rotting in jail right now. Number 1. R. Kelly. He once ruled the airwaves with songs that touched millions, but the voice that soared across stadiums now echoes inside prison walls. In 2021, R. Kelly was sentenced to 30 years for racketeering and sex trafficking, accused of using his fame to control and abuse underage girls. 2 years later, another conviction in Chicago added 20 more years for child pornography. His crimes exposed a decades-long empire of manipulation that had hidden in plain sight. For years, his fans refused to believe. His music played at weddings, graduations, and dreams. Yet behind the rhythm was silence, the silence of those he hurt. When the documentary Surviving R. Kelly aired in 2019, the world finally listened. The image of the king of R&B collapsed overnight. Streaming platforms erased him, and friends vanished. Once a symbol of inspiration, he became a monument to exploitation. Now 58 years old, R. Kelly spends his days in a federal cell, his fortune gone, his legacy burned by the truth he tried to silence. Number 2. Joe Exotic. Before the bars, he was a spectacle, a man wrapped in glitter, tigers, and chaos. The world met Joe Exotic in 2020 through Netflix's Tiger King, a surreal portrait of fame built on obsession. That same year, a federal court sentenced him to 22 years for plotting the murder of animal rights activist Carol Baskin and for violating multiple wildlife laws. Beneath the eccentric showman was a man consumed by envy and rage. He had dreamed of being a star, not for his voice or his talent, but for his defiance. The roadside zoo he owned became his stage, a carnival of danger and ego where animals suffered as his audience grew. Prosecutors revealed he hired 2 men to kill Baskin, his rival who exposed his cruelty. The proof was undeniable: threats, money transfers, and recordings that shattered his claims of innocence. Inside prison, Joe Exotic still craves the camera. He's filed appeals, posted letters, and even announced a doomed campaign for president. But behind the walls, no one listens. His body weakens from illness. The tigers that once made him famous are gone. The king of spectacle is now just another prisoner counting years. His story a warning that fame without conscience always ends in ruin. Number 3. Harvey Weinstein. Once the most powerful man in Hollywood, Harvey Weinstein built empires from scripts and dreams. Through his company Miramax, he turned independent films like Pulp Fiction and Shakespeare in Love into cultural milestones, shaping careers and controlling the industry with fear and favors. But behind the red carpets and Oscar speeches hid decades of silence. Silence bought, threatened, and broken only when the truth became too heavy to contain. In 2020, a New York court convicted him of rape and sexual assault, ending his reign as a kingmaker. 3 years later, Los Angeles handed him another 16 years for additional crimes committed in hotel suites during his peak. Even when the New York verdict was overturned in 2024, the California sentence ensured his fate. Now 73, he will likely die behind bars. The man who once dictated cinema's future now shuffles through prison corridors, blind in one eye and crippled by illness. His name, once whispered with awe, has become a curse, a reminder of how power can turn to predation when no one dares to say no. The Me Too movement rose from his downfall, rewriting the story of Hollywood forever. Weinstein's empire is dust, his legacy a scar the industry will never forget. Number 4. Danny Masterson. He was the laid-back rebel everyone loved from that 70s show. The guy who made audiences laugh, who seemed untouchable beneath the charm. But in 2023, the mask fell. A Los Angeles court sentenced Danny Masterson to 30 years to life for the rape of 2 women at his Hollywood Hills home in the early 2000s. The testimony was chilling. Drugged drinks, furor, and silence enforced not only by intimidation but by the powerful shadow of Scientology. For decades, his victims were trapped in that silence. They were told to stay quiet, to protect the image of the church, to protect him. But when the truth resurfaced in the late 2010s, the case reopened, and justice finally came. His conviction marked one of Hollywood's harshest sentences for a television star, a man whose fame once bought him protection, now stripped of everything. He was fired from Netflix's The Ranch long before the verdict, his career already collapsing under the weight of accusations. Friends distanced themselves, and the industry that once embraced him turned cold. Today, Masterson wakes each morning to the sound of metal doors, not applause. The actor who once embodied rebellion became a prisoner of his own crimes, proof that no celebrity image can outshine the truth. Number 5. Suge Knight. He once ruled the West Coast with an iron fist, the man behind Death Row Records, the label that made Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, and Tupac Shakur legends. Suge Knight was not just a producer, he was a force of fear, money, and power, commanding respect through intimidation. But the same violence that built his empire would one day destroy it. In 2018, he was sentenced to 28 years in prison for voluntary manslaughter after running over 2 men during a dispute on a film set. One of them died instantly. The footage was undeniable. A car, a struggle, a fatal decision that ended any hope of redemption. Once the titan of hip-hop, Knight became a cautionary tale of control turned chaos. Behind bars, time has done what no rival ever could: break him. Health issues, blindness in one eye, diabetes, exhaustion have reduced the once towering figure to a frail silhouette of his past. From chart-topping albums to the silence of a prison cell, his story is proof that empires built on fear will always fall. The man who once defined an era now counts his days in the shadows, haunted by the sound of his own legend fading away. Number 6. Ryan Grantham. He was the kind of face you recognized but never truly remembered. The boy from Diary of a Wimpy Kid, the teenager from Riverdale, a quiet presence in the background of Hollywood's youth. No one imagined the darkness growing behind that calm expression. But in 2022, the world learned the truth. Ryan Grantham was sentenced to life in prison for murdering his mother, Barbara Waite. On a spring evening in 2020, as she played the piano in their home, he walked up behind her and pulled the trigger. Afterward, he filmed his confession and packed his car with weapons, planning further violence that never happened. Instead, he turned himself in, a hollow gesture from a young man who had already destroyed everything good in his life. In court, prosecutors revealed his journals filled with despair, paranoia, and thoughts of death. His mother had been his greatest supporter, the only person who believed in him. Her murder was both senseless and symbolic, a final act of a mind collapsing under the weight of its own demons. Now in his mid-20s, Grantham sits behind bars, his name erased from the credits of every show he touched. Fame didn't destroy him, madness did. Number 7. Michael Jace. He played a cop on television, strong, conflicted, moral. On The Shield, Michael Jace was praised for his emotional depth, the actor who could make pain look human. But off-screen, the pain was real, and in 2016, it turned fatal. A Los Angeles court sentenced him to 40 years to life for the second-degree murder of his wife, April. On May 19, 2014, their 2 young sons watched as their father ended their mother's life. Financial problems, jealousy, and rage had been boiling for months. That night, it erupted. He called the police himself after shooting her multiple times, including twice in the legs, telling her, with chilling cruelty, "If you like running, run to heaven now." Those words became the echo that followed him into prison. Jace once shared the screen with stars, appearing in Forrest Gump and Southland. He was respected, professional, even admired. But that image shattered the moment he pulled the trigger. His career, his family, his freedom, gone in an instant. Today, Michael Jace is just another inmate in a California state prison, known not for the characters he played, but for the tragedy he created. A man who acted out justice on screen and delivered horror in real life. Number 8. Zach Avery. He wasn't famous for his acting, he was famous for his lies. Zach Avery, born Zachary Horwitz, dreamed of Hollywood stardom, but found a faster way to play the role of success. For years, he conned investors out of more than $200 million in one of the largest frauds the film industry had ever seen. In 2022, he was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison for running a massive Ponzi scheme built on fake movie distribution deals with Netflix and HBO. He threw glamorous parties, drove luxury cars, and told everyone he was the next big producer. Investors believed him. They handed over life savings, retirement funds, even college accounts. But the contracts were forged, the companies never existed, and the profits were pure fiction. When the truth surfaced, hundreds of victims were left bankrupt. The dream he sold had devoured their lives. In court, Avery stood silent as prosecutors described how greed had replaced talent, how every dollar was stolen under the glow of Hollywood's illusion. Now, behind bars, the suits and champagne are gone. The actor who pretended to be powerful lives in a cell where there are no cameras, no applause, only time. His story is a reminder that in Hollywood, sometimes the best performances happen off-screen, and they always come at a cost. Number 9. Skylar DeLeon. Once, he dreamed of fame. As a child, he appeared briefly on Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, his moment of glory lasting only seconds on screen. But when the spotlight faded, greed took its place. By 2009, Skylar DeLeon was no longer chasing roles. He was facing death row for one of the most brutal crimes in California's history. In 2004, he and his accomplices murdered Thomas and Jackie Hawks, a retired couple who were selling their yacht. Posing as buyers, DeLeon convinced them to take a test run at sea. Once aboard, the couple was tied up, forced to sign ownership papers, and then dragged overboard with an anchor. Their bodies were never found. The cold precision of the act horrified even veteran investigators. The trial revealed weeks of planning, the obsession with money, the manipulation, the complete absence of remorse. Witnesses described a man willing to kill for luxury he couldn't afford, for a life he could only imitate. The jury needed no persuasion. He was sentenced to death, now awaiting execution at San Quentin State Prison. Skylar DeLeon's story is not about a failed actor. It's about a man who traded humanity for greed. A name once lost in television credits, now carved forever into the history of horror. Number 10. Eric Weinberg. For years, he lived in the glow of television success. As a writer and co-executive producer on the hit comedy Scrubs, Eric Weinberg was part of Hollywood's creative elite. His name rolled through the credits of shows millions adored. But behind the laughter, there was darkness. In 2022, that darkness came to light when he was arrested and charged with multiple counts of sexual assault spanning nearly 2 decades. Prosecutors said he used his reputation as a gatekeeper to lure women to his home under the guise of professional photo shoots. Once isolated, he attacked them. At least 5 women were directly linked to the charges, but investigators believe there are many more. The accusations were detailed, horrifying, and consistent, stories of betrayal, fear, and manipulation by a man who hid behind a smile and a resume. Weinberg now faces more than a dozen felony counts, including rape and false imprisonment. If convicted on all charges, he will likely spend the rest of his life behind bars. Studios have erased his name, colleagues have condemned him, and the legacy he once built has turned to ash. The man who helped write laughter now sits in silence, proof that the monsters in Hollywood don't always hide in the shadows. Sometimes they work in the writer's room. Number 11. David Pierce. He was no celebrity, just another name in Hollywood's party scene, a promoter who thrived in the city's neon nightlife. But beneath the glamour, David Pierce was a predator. In August 2025, he was convicted of 2 counts of murder for the deaths of model Christy Giles and her friend Hilda Marcella Cabrales Arzola. Their bodies were found outside Los Angeles hospitals in 2021, left there by men who disappeared into the night. The investigation revealed a nightmare hiding behind luxury apartments and VIP lists. Pierce had built a network of manipulation, inviting women to parties, drugging them, and exploiting their vulnerability. For years, rumors followed him, whispers of assaults brushed aside by connections and silence. But when Christy and Hilda died, the truth surfaced. The autopsies told the story, a mix of drugs, assault, and deliberate abandonment. At trial, 7 more women came forward with testimonies of being drugged and attacked. Their courage exposed years of unchecked abuse masked by wealth and status. The jury's verdict ended his freedom and stripped away the illusion of another self-proclaimed Hollywood insider. Now, David Pierce sits in a cell, awaiting final sentencing, his name forever linked not to fame or fortune, but to death, deceit, and the darkness that feeds on Hollywood's nightlife. Number 12. Joe Sun. He wanted to be famous, but the only role the world remembers him for is one of cruelty. Joe Sun, a former mixed martial artist and bit actor, best known for playing Random Task in Austin Powers' International Man of Mystery, is now serving life in prison without parole. In 2011, he was convicted for his role in a brutal gang rape and torture that took place in 1990, a crime that remained unsolved until DNA evidence finally exposed him decades later. The details were unspeakable. The victim was kidnapped at gunpoint, repeatedly assaulted, and left to die. She survived, and years later, her courage brought her attacker to justice. Already imprisoned for another offense, Sun was charged with multiple counts of sexual assault, sodomy, and kidnapping. The court showed no mercy, and even behind bars, his violence continued. In 2011, he murdered his cellmate, erasing any hope of redemption. The man who once chased laughter on screen now lives in the silence of a California prison, his name synonymous with horror. Hollywood forgot him, but the record will not. His short-lived fame, his fighting career, his dreams, all buried under the weight of the violence he unleashed. Joe Sun's story is the final collapse of a life consumed by brutality. Number 13. Colin Walker. He wanted to be a star, rapper, actor, influencer. For a while, it looked like he might succeed. Colin Walker, known as KR, appeared in films like Superfly and built an online image of luxury, fame, and talent. But behind the posts and photo shoots was something much darker. In 2022, he was sentenced to 50 years to life in prison for multiple counts of rape, accused of using his growing fame to lure women and aspiring models into private casting sessions that ended in assault. The pattern was chillingly calculated. He promised opportunities, connections, fame. Once they trusted him, he trapped them. Dozens came forward, describing the same manipulation, the same betrayal. Their voices shattered the illusion he had crafted so carefully. In court, survivors confronted him face to face, turning their trauma into strength. The jury had no doubts. The verdict was swift, the sentence severe. Today, Walker sits in a California prison, his fame erased, his name spoken only as a warning. The music is gone, the spotlight dark. What remains is the echo of his own deception, proof that no dream built on the pain of others can last. His story closes this list of fallen stars, a generation of power, wealth, and arrogance turned to dust behind bars. 13 names, 13 stories. Once adored, now condemned. They traded red carpets for concrete walls, applause for silence. Hollywood creates legends, but it also exposes monsters. If this story pulled you into the shadows of fame, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more tales from the dark side of Hollywood.